Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and this week we've got yet another slew of class changes for the Midnight Alpha, which should hopefully be transferring to a beta realm very soon. And with it, we're seeing continuous changes to a variety of different classes. However, while previous expansions would add abilities and add talents, this expansion of Midnight is actually looking to prune classes, removing core abilities, simplifying a lot of the gameplay, and one of the classes that exemplifies this the most, I would say, is the Priest. Especially if you like healing on a Priest, but always found it maybe a little difficult or intimidating picking up Holy and Discipline, it looks like Midnight is actually making those two healing specs easier and simpler to play than ever before. Shadow Priests are also getting simplified as well, removing a lot of the fluff abilities that allowed for some build diversity, but it actually opens them up to new capabilities in the next expansion, where it looks like they continue to receive quite a bit of love, especially through some of the Apex talents. For today's video, I really wanted to do a deeper dive at everything happening to the class of Priest for Midnight so far during early development. Since it's a long video, I will have chapter marks down below so you can skip around to all the sections you're the most interested in, and feel free to let me know in the comments which class you want me to cover next. I also have a playlist for all the classes that we covered so far. But with that being said, as always, if you guys want to keep up with regular class changes for Midnight, and if you want to see more regular updates, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Starting things off with the hero talents, we have the playstyle of Archon, which is still a work in progress, as you could see. But for the most part, what they're doing with Archon is they're making Halo, the ability that is shared between Shadow Priest and Holy Priest, exclusive to Archon. Like, you can't even play the ability of Halo unless you pick up Archon, since it's so heavily revolved around it that they decided just to slot that as your core ability, which is good to some degree. I think it does help clear out the bloat for some of the talents, which is what they're looking to do for this expansion, but it's also just weird how a basic priest ability is now a hero talent specifically. The next hero spec is the Oracle, and this one is going to be a pretty massive, like, maybe a little bit too jarring of like, whoa, they're really simplifying priest by a bunch. Like, the main mechanic of premonition, of being able to cycle through all these buffs, giving you a bit of like expertise of how you use those buffs, is gone completely. That whole mechanic of these like gameplay augmentations that you can apply and giving you that freedom for cooldown reduction, piety, that huge shield that you can provide, and the capstone where you got all three benefits, it removed out of the game completely. They just basically taken some of the remnants of what Oracle was and just redistributed them all over the place, with the core abilities Guiding Light, which gives you 2 charges of penance for disc and 2 charges of prayer of mending for holy, and that's essentially it. Like, we have talents like prompt prognosis, where the first bolt of penance or the first ally hit by prayer or mending gets hit, they just take a huge heal immediately. Piety, which allows some of that overhealing that you passively would generate to be splashed onto nearby targets, which is kind of nice to a degree. And then there's the capstone, which is Twin Sight, which allows for penance to cleave in nearby targets. So if you use penance to heal an ally, it'll try to hit an enemy. If you use penance to hit an enemy, it'll try to heal an ally. But for Holy, it just basically gives prayer mending a chance to hit a second target with a few extra charges, so that's kind of nice. But yeah, Oracle for the most part has been simplified to such a degree where any mechanics that are unique or difficult to play around with Oracle have been just simplified into just a bunch of passive bonuses. And finally, we have Void Weaver, which for Shadow Priest exclusively will teach them the ability of Void Torrent. So Shadow Priest no longer have Void Torrent as a spec skill. It is now something that is taught from Void Weaver directly. For Disc Priest, it still works off of like the Rift itself, still plays off of the Mind Blast ability specifically. And while this one doesn't have too many new talents, it did get a couple of new ones. It does have a tree filled out with just a handful of options, such as Quicken Pulse, where Shadow Word Pain and Entropic Rift will deal damage a little faster for both Shadow and Disc. We have Touch of the Void, where the proc of Void Heart now persists for 8 seconds longer after the Rift ends, as well as Overwhelming Shadows, which either buffs Void Torrent damage or Mind Blast damage, depending on your spec. But outside of that, Void Weaver still retains the mechanic of using a core ability to proc Rift, and then using certain skills in order to pump up your Rift in value. But for the most part, it doesn't really change too much from there. Now, when it comes to the class talents for Priest, we are receiving just a little bit of an adjustment for some of these abilities, and as you take a look at the talents, like, you'll see things like Mind Blaster up here, Angelic Feathers way up here, Improved Flash Heal up here, even like Psychic Scream is something that could potentially be talented into. But we also do see a number of talents removed from it completely, like Void Shield, Power Word Live, Sunland, Divine Star, as well as abilities like Renew. Some of the more notable things about these talent tree right now is the PI is still in the game. It is still kind of managed to end up somewhere in the middle of the talent tree, and double PI is still a mechanic, which is why I think they brought it up higher to the talent tree, just so like most priests are going to end up picking up double PI if you're doing any group content, so they might as well make it as easy to reach it. There are a couple of cool new talent options, like for Holy Nova, there is a new talent of Light Burst, which increases the damage of Holy Nova significantly, as well as its healing, but gives it a heftier cooldown, so you can use it every 30 seconds for like a big pulse of damage or healing, but not necessarily something that you need to spam or need to like watch any charges for, which makes it just a little bit easier to use. They also brought back one of my favorite spells, Spectral Illusion, where now when you use Fade, it'll now create this illusion of yourself that causes enemies to attack it. And I've loved this spell ever since they added it in Pandaria. I feel like for PvE content, it can be really neat in order just to be able to duck away from an enemy, maybe have your illusion absorb a very powerful hit. And I think this is going to be awesome for solo content and potentially even delve and prey content as well. And from all the reworks for Priest, your capstone ends up being Angelic Bulwark, which still grants you a shield. We now have a choice now between Benevolence or Focus Power, which either increases your healing or damaging spells. We have Phantom Reach, which gives you a little bit more range from both spells, as well as Translucent Image, which now gives Fade damage reduction component, which is actually pretty nice since Fade has other benefits like a shorter cooldown and such. From here on, we can move on to the actual spec talent trees, and I will reiterate this one more time. This right here, going from Disc to Holy to Shadow, is where you'll see a lot of that pruning and streamlining, quote unquote, going on, but it's like a heavy amount of simplification that's happening to Priest. It's actually kind of wild. Like, on one hand, there are some class simplifications that are like something to look forward to because they make classes that are super complex easier to play. But then there's others where they take any of that fun complexity and just make it like not complex at all. So to some degree, it kind of does take some of that fun aspect of what I used to enjoy out of classes out of it completely. And it's just feeling a little wild. So for Disc Priest in particular, there's a bunch of familiar talents that have just been shifted around in spaces a little bit. But for the most part, there are only like some handful of unique simplifications within the talent tree. Out of all the new talents, Play does make a return to the spec tree. Since Renew is gone, they wanted to find a version of Renew that Disc Priest would be able to play into. So Play is just an instacast heal with a pretty short mana cost. It applies Atonement to all allies that you hit it with, so if you need to spread Plea to multiple targets, instead of spamming Power Word Shield or Flash Heal, you can now just do that with Plea if you need to heal on the move or spread Atonements on the move, for instance. And it's also cheaper to cast than Flash Heal, so at least mana cost wise, it looks like they're trying to be very accountable for it, so it should maybe make it a little bit nicer of an ability to use. But it's also interesting with Plea is none of your other skills in the rest of the talent tree interact with Plea. But if you are looking for an easy way to be able to spread atonements, like on the move and stuff, Plea is a talent point that you'll need to invest into, setting below Light's Promise. But yeah, the fact that the rest of your kit doesn't really like buff Plea or interact with Plea in any interesting way is a little unusual to me. Outside of this, a lot of the baseline abilities for Priest have been changed in a major way, like Evangelism. Instead of being an ability that now prolongs all of your atonements after you spread them across like a raid or something, it now is an ability that allows you to spread atonements easier instead. So instead of prolonging atonements, it spreads atonements. Like when you cast Evangelism, it immediately fires off a powered radiance on a target at a much greater effectiveness, so it still has this healing component, and causes powered radiance to have no cooldown and have a shorter or lower mana cost for 8 seconds. So now you can spread this ability around quite a lot, quite heavily. So it's actually kind of nice. So if you're in a raid setting, if you need to spread atonements really quickly, press Evangelism, couple of radiances, and now everybody has atonement, and now you can move on into like a damage window while healing the entire raid. So that whole component seems to be very interesting by itself. They did make some changes, like Ultimate Penitence is now on the same row as Power Word Barrier. So now you have a choice between dropping down a massive dome to protect your allies, or using Ultimate Penitence to deal a bunch of damage with penances, or possibly directly heal allies with those penances. It's a little bit unfortunate that Priests are essentially losing a cooldown and now they have a choice between Ultimate Penitence or barrier. Previously, they used to have both of them, so it was like you could use one cooldown for one mechanic, another cooldown for another. So this is a little bit unfortunate, to be honest. They also are simplifying the damage and rotation of Priest as well, with talents such as Shadow Tap, which greatly buffs up the value of Mind Blast and also making it cost a little bit more mana, but that initial damage hit, it's kind of huge. But they're removing any like Mind Blast used to set up Schism as a debuff on a target to make him take more damage. Instead, they're basically just making all those damaging talents like passive shadow damage increases. So there's no longer going to be this kind of weaving of shadow to damage or heal. If you are hitting your enemies with a shadow spell, it'll probably just hit really, really hard. They also have some new additions like Greater Smite, where casting Smite increases the casting speeds and damage of other smites, stacking up to 2 times and lasts for 2 seconds. So if you're spamming smites over and over and over, like let's say you spread atonements on everybody and you're spamming smites back to back, those smites are going to grow in value in terms of the raw damage. So this could be potentially a really nice way for you to incorporate some holy damage as part of your build. Also, a new capstone for Priest, or I guess quote-unquote new, is Inner Light, which essentially is Inner Light and Shadow, which has 2 different buffs that you can switch between every 6 seconds. With the Inner Light buff, you embrace the light to reduce the mana cost of your healing spells, but with Inner Shadow, you increase your spell damage and atonement healing. So this allows you to either play into this like healer role or like a damage healer role. So this could be good on raids, this could potentially be good in PvP, and this could just allow you to basically amplify one aspect of your mechanic depending on the content. So like if let's say for a big raid-wide mechanic you spread atonements and you want to pump as much damage as possible, you go into the Inner Shadow phase and then do that raid-wide healing. But let's say if you need like some off healing or spot healing for the group where the atonement damage is just not enough and you need to like hard heal people, you can switch to Inner Light to reduce some of that mana cost, so you can save mana during like downtime and then pump big damage during, you know, big raid uptime. So this could potentially be really fun in the future. The Apex talent for Disc Race is also interesting because it actually starts out in the middle and you can head it to the left side or to the right side. It's not an Apex talent that upgrades like in a single direction. This one seems to go in any direction, and this gives you a little bit more control of how many points you want to invest into it, with the main talent being Master of Darkness. Penance has a high chance to upgrade your powered shield into a Void Shield, which instead of shielding 1 ally, it shields 3, absorbing quite a lot of damage on those allies. And you can either upgrade it with some passives of Master of Darkness, which increase shadow damage and atonement healing, which could potentially be really nice, or you could go in the opposite direction and pick up the buff where Void Shield reflects a portion of its damage taken back to enemies, which counts as atonement-based healing. So the more shields you can spread, the more of these Void Shields you can have, the more damage it reflects, the more atonement healing it actually does for your party, which can actually give you some huge shielding, but also even more atonement-based healing. So those could potentially be really interesting, especially with things like Oracle, for instance, that are heavy into buffing up that shield and making it as potent as humanly possible. So that could be some fun to be had as either Void Weaver, but also Oracle as well. Now, the mechanical prune for Disc Priest was pretty up there, but I think Holy Priest mechanics prune is even bigger than that, as numerous abilities from Holy Priest kit have been completely wiped out, with abilities like Heal as well as Renew, Symbols of Hope, Lightwell, Divine Word, and Answer Prayers all completely removed. Instead, Holy Priests are going to focus on core skills like Holy Word Serenity on immediate a single target healing, Holy Word Sanctify for big burst healing, Prayer of Mending as his bounce and heal, Flash Heal, Prayer of Healing, as well as cooldowns such as Guardian Spirit, Divine Hymn, and Apotheosis, and that's it. That's all they essentially want you to work with as your kit. I guess abilities like Holy Fire are still in the game, but yeah, for the most part, in terms of the healing buttons, there's not nearly as many buttons as they used to be. With a numerous number of the passive talents, which some are going to be familiar, some are going to be newer, primarily looking to just augment your basic core skill. And one of the best talents that we can take a look at how they're going about it is the talent of Ultimate Serenity specifically. With the talent of Ultimate Serenity, you are essentially increasing the healing of your Holy Word Serenity by 10%, but also giving it an AoE component, causing it to heal 4 nearby allies for 15% of its initial healing, and talents affecting Sanctify are now instead affect Serenity. So it's for any priest that just don't want to play Sanctify at all, and just want to press Serenity. Make it an AoE ability, basically taking the AoE component of Sanctify and just bake it into Serenity, and all the talents above Sanctify instead go to buff Serenity, so you basically can actually take talents to prune your rotational bar even further. This does give Holy Priest a little bit of this like spot healing potential, like the burst healing components, and like certain heals, like whenever you cast AoE healing with Prayer of Healing, normally that would like give you back on Sanctifying cooldown reduction. That instead is gonna go to Serenity. So there's some wacky things like that, but they're essentially go to like remove even more buttons from your overall rotation, which is super weird to look at. The rest of the talents, like I said, I'm mostly familiar with. The left hand side talents mostly focusing on buffing things like Flash Heal as well as Prayer of Healing, while the right hand side is mostly looking to buff your Prayer of Mending, and the middle row is most of your basic core abilities, which didn't really change too much from the War Within iteration. Your apex talent is a Benediction. Prayer of Mending has a chance to empower Flash Heal to become an ability called Benediction, healing of the target, increasing its healing by 30% and causing the ability to also proc a Cosmic Ripple, which just does some AoE healing. With the next trait, you can increase the effectiveness of the Cosmic Ripple, and with the final trait, each pulse of Divine Hymn now emits a Cosmic Ripple at 75% effectiveness. During Apotheosis, Flash Heal is automatically upgraded to Benediction for its entire duration. This overall is an interesting set of Apex talent that significantly increases the spot healing capability, or bursty single target healing capability, of Holy Priest, which could potentially be good in number of content, whether we're looking at raiding content where spot healing is very important if you don't have a Holy Paladin in a group, but also spot healing can be amazing in smaller group content like Mythic Pluses, as well as PvP content as well. Finally, we arrive to the spec of Shadow Priest, where they are actually getting some good utility. Things like Silence is now baseline, and it becomes a 30-second cooldown instead of a 45-second cooldown. So you don't have actually a proper kick, but Silence being a shorter CD, I mean, it's always good. It's always something that's a positive change. Abilities like Dispersion are baseline, and even Vampiric Embrace are baseline, which is super nice for Shadow Priest because it felt like those abilities were mandatory in your talent tree anyway, but that's just our... It's just super nice. It's just one of those quality of life improvements that we love to see. They did change the ability of Devouring Plague and renamed it to Shadow Ward Madness, which does the same playstyle and damage of Devouring Plague. It just no longer has this like self-heal component. So they just basically changed the name without really changing the effectiveness too much. They also got a new spell called Tentacle Slam. Some people refer to it as the hentai. So every 15 seconds you can hentai your targets. And Tentacle Slam is essentially a Shadow Crash. It is just a new version of Shadow Crash that may potentially have some nicer positional attachment to it, since it's like a frontal slam AoE ability. So that could be good in some targeting situations, but it doesn't really change the mechanics too much. It just mostly just adds this like Nazathian tentacle flavor to the spec of Shadow Priest. Void Form is now your only offensive cooldown. Instead of having two options, you just have Void Form as one every 2 minutes. Void Form, once you use it, it replaces itself with the ability called Void Volley. So instead of a Void Bolt, now you cast a volley of AoE damage hitting multiple targets in an area. And you can further upgrade Void Form to either make it a little bit burstier and have it do more damage, or casting Shadow Ward Madness, your old school Devouring Plague, would extend the duration of Void Form. So you can either go for longevity or potentially just immediate more oomph damage. A lot of the talents in the Shadow Priest tree are pretty much the same. They do have a couple of dead spots right now, which are still, coming soon talents, since the whole mechanic of Void Rift is now, or Torrent specifically, is now Void Weaver skill. They did end up placing Shadow Fiend, which is no longer a priest ability. It is a Shadow Priest only skill on the left hand side with its minion row specifically. The biggest change coming to Shadow Priest though are going to be their Apex talents, which are actually kind of interesting, being Void Apparitions. When an effect from an idol is activated, which you have Idol of Yasharaj, even though that doesn't look like the right spelling. Apparently that is how you say it, Yasharaj. You have the Idol in Azoth, Idol Yaxarum, and Idol Cthulhu. Whenever you proc an idol, you summon a shadowy apparition, so more guaranteed spirits for you to summon. There's a chance those apparitions will be transformed into void or apparitions that hit the target with a void bolt, so they're basically stronger apparitions that hit harder. And whenever you use the Tentacle Slam ability, it now has a 100% chance to activate one of your idols immediately. So depending on the idols that you are talented into, like Yeshuraj, you always get the proc of Call of the Void for a big haste buff. With Idol and Azoth, you have either two buffs that you could proc. Either they have burst effect or the full burst effect, though this one seems to be at least RNG. For the time being, maybe this will change throughout alpha and beta testing. With Idol of the Extra One, you immediately spawn the thing from beyond to fight for you every time you Tentacle Slam. And with the Idol of Cthulhu, you have a chance to either spawn a little Void Tentacle or a Void Lasher. One does single target damage, one does AoE damage. So depending on how you build your character, with the Tentacle Slam, you could possibly like spec into a very specific idol and proc those idols with that Tentacle Slam more regularly, giving you control over some of your most impactful passive effects that are part of your capstone traits, which could potentially be really interesting when it comes to setting up big bursts and weaving in those abilities as part of your baseline gameplay. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching and hope you guys did enjoy this update. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to join our Discord community, especially if you want to keep up with regular midnight class changes. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.